All right.
Right. Okay, so we're here for another session of Procurement and Finance Coffee Break.
Absolutely.
Today we're going to be discussing data. It's a it's a thrilling subject. But
Strong coffee, honestly. Okay.
But it's an important subject because the reality is if you don't
is.
address it, unfortunately your systems and processes will not work. So unfortunately as well, my experience with this is that on most business transformation programs, particularly ERP implementations, which is an area I specialise in, it's an area that's not addressed adequately early. So anyway, we've got a few questions to talk through, and the first one I've got for Richard is, what is good data, Richard? What does it look like?
Good data. Well, good data is nothing like any of the data I've ever seen when I've been working. I mean, look, procurement. If there's a procurement professional out there that's got accurate spend data, drop me an email. I'd love to hear from you. The point is, it's a mess, and you know, it's for good reason, right? It can be at the simplest level. People just don't type the right things in when they're doing stuff. Or it can be down to actually much more complex things. I mean, we've talked a couple of times about transformations. If you're in a big company, the chances are you've combined data sets from several different ERP systems, either because of loss of functionality or merger and acquisition. And every time you merge data, it never quite lines up. So what is good data? And good data, you know, as Claire just said, is the start of a successful journey in anything technology. Good data is consistent, it's accurate, and it's what I call decision grade. So if you've got good data, it will allow you to gain insights and to make decisions. And cleanliness is a word that you'll often hear around it, but effectively means, one, we can trust it. Secondly, it's in consistent formats when we understand what those are so it can go. And the bottom line, do you know what? I guess we're going to talk about in a minute, is it isn't an easy journey to get there from wherever you are.
No,
right?
it's not. So to that point, one of the things I always advise at the start of a transformation project is to start doing some data due diligence on exactly what data you have, and what data you're missing. So just another question from your point of view, Richard. When you're looking to implement a new procurement system or improve the quality of your data, what are the typical activities from a procurement point of view would you advise to invest time in?
Right. So in our last coffee break, we talked about the importance of communication in change management. And we said, look, if you're in a face-to-face meeting, say a message 3 times. If you're online, maybe even twice as much, 6 times.
Yeah.
And with data, it is the same message. It is check it and check it and check it again and get help to do it. There are many companies out there. Sometimes the vendor will do it. Sometimes they're third parties whose entire specialism is cleaning data. But if you take the good old Pareto 80-20 rule, if I was implementing any kind of new system, I'm not joking, I'd spend 80% of my time on making sure the data was okay. Because do you know what? One, that ensures you only spend 20% of your time doing the system, but it means that in the future, you won't spend 80% of your time trying to correct mistakes in your technology because the data was wrong. So 80-20, invest it in sorting the data. And I say data due diligence, what are we looking at? We're looking at checking that cleanliness, checking that consistency. We're looking at where it's stored and how it's transferred. We're looking at how it's going to be used by the technology that's coming in and whether that has an impact on the technologies that you've currently got. You know, it's not unheard of in procurement that you'll bring in some whiz-bang procure-to-pay solution and it can't communicate effectively with your accounting systems just because the data formats are different.
And to use your analogy, you've got a steam-powered Tesla?
A steam-powered Tesla, yeah, I love it, right? I mean, it literally is a case of if you've got bad data, you're buying a Tesla and you're trying to make it run on coal because, you know, that's what bad data does to great tech. I mean, look, assuming we've done that well, we've got clean data, we've done we've got someone in to go and do our due diligence, to do our assessment of whether we're in a good state, and that might, obviously lead to us having to invest quite a lot of work to clean it before we start.
Yeah.
But we've touched on good old P2P accounts payable, which is just but one of the many ways that procurement and finance work together.
Yeah.
When it comes to data, how do we kind of make sure that we're speaking the same language?
So I think it's important, particularly if you're going through any sort of change program, but even on a business as usual basis, to have some data definitions. So have some sort of data dictionary that maps out, all the important data points you have as a business and gives a definition to them. So you're all saying the same names and meaning the same things. So you're not talking past each other, because that's a common problem. That people have one department will have one word for something, and another department will have another word. You're sort of talking past each other.
It's a bit like the old supper, tea, and dinner.
Yes. So have a data dictionary ideally. And then agree on a common data source. And the reason I say this is if you're a company that has different systems that aren't integrated particularly well, that will mean you have different sources of data across the end-to-end process flow. So if you're going to use a source of data to measure performance between procurement and finance, if you're looking at one set of data set and actually there's been a load of adjustments put through and there's another data set over here, we need to make sure that we're looking at the same data set to analyse and compare and work together on.
And this is when master data comes in, the idea of having a single source of truth, which might be used in many different places, but there is one.
Yes. Yes. So, and then I think the other thing is foster good communication, because without the sort of the definitions, without using the same data set, if you're operating in silos using different definitions, different data sets, then you're never going to be talking to each other very well, are you?
No, exactly. A common problem for procurement and finance, actually. I mean, actually, you're right, because if you do all those things and you establish through asking yourself the question about where your data is, about investing in getting it cleaned, about understanding where it's mastered, it might take a ton of time, but it really is going to make, there will be an ROI on that investment, even if that ROI is you not then spending the rest of your working life trying to patch problems, right?
Absolutely. And from a finance and procurement point of view, where you realise you do have problems, let's say you've assessed the data definitions and realised actually maybe only for 75% of the data you have a definition for it. Let's say example, or there's problems having a complete data source in one area. If you have good communication, you can then establish some shared objectives together, where you have common ground. So perhaps that's like, okay, well, let's agree as departments to work together to flesh out the missing data definitions and to agree how we compile the data to be one data pool we can utilise together. And I think the other thing that we can do to speak the same language is acknowledge that the fact that from a finance point of view, we work on essentially an accounting data model, which is the chart of accounts, all the dimensions you analyse the chart of accounts by, and that procurement have often additional cost taxonomies, and those are linked inevitably to the chart of accounts, which you budget at. So if you work together to go through from a finance point of view the accounting data model, and then from a procurement point of view the cost taxonomies and how those two link together, then very soon you'll be all on the same page.
Apart from about savings, where you never agree that we've achieved the savings we've said, you come up with lots of different terms for saying why they're not savings. Actually, no, you make a really good point there, and we are going to be talking about
the accounting data model in a future. It's an important thing to talk through, because it's basically the backbone of how you structure your data.
And look, the point that you've just made about us having slightly different versions of the truth. I mean, in any procurement team, there are GL codes for the products and the services that we buy, But that's not necessarily the same as the way that we manage those categories in a procurement team. And if we don't clear up those differences, I mean, that causes a problem, but it applies to data in the round.
And
right?
another thing is to consider that from a procurement point of view, you're going to be using your cost taxonomies to budget by, but you're also going to be budgeting on a cash spend basis, whereas from a finance point of view, we're going to be budgeting on an accruals basis. Right. So the two things all do roll up to one accounting annual operating plan, but it's just two different ways of looking at it.
Right.
And if you can understand the accounting data model, sit together, go through it, then you will realise how from a cash point of view, your budget rolls up into an accruals operating plan.
It's interesting, isn't it, that, you know, we talked about communication in the last one. Data is just another kind of communication.
It is
that flow of information between the different systems that we use.
Yeah.
And if you don't focus on it, you're going to be in trouble. That's the unhelpful summary. The good news is you can do a lot about it.
Yeah. So I think we'll just finish in being, if you're considering doing a transformation program, be super proactive about doing some data due diligence, and assign someone in the business who's going to own that task, who's going to whose sole mission is to assess the quality of the data against your to-be target model.
Perfect. Well, okay, we finished. We got through it. We talked data and we stayed awake.
We
Good
did.
Coffee, right. What are we doing next time? Business cases, I think.
Yes, that's
Business
right,
cases,
yes.
a matter close to my heart because everyone always says no. But we're going to talk you through it. Look, as ever, have a watch. Let us know if there's topics you want us to talk about. Give us feedback. It would be great to hear from you. But for now, from Claire and I, goodbye.
Bye.